very strong. They both play in a lot of tournaments. I've seen them in multiple pro tourneys, and they both do very well. Dally Lamer especially. So, you know, this is something that's not too off-keel. This is not just Bronze League play right here. These are both very strong players. Now, as you can see, we did end up spreading our creep here through this little destructible debris canal, something that we can't break through until we kill these rocks, of course. But in spreading that creep, it allowed us to see the mix that he has. And, okay, we see Colossus, so what do? We start building Corruptors. And we had this in preparation. We didn't build Corruptors just because we had a Spire, but we built a Spire in case we needed Corruptors, and that's something else that you really need to take note of. We also have an infestation pit lying around somewhere. I'm going to try to find it there. We have an infestation pit. Now, do we have any infestors? No, we do not. Again, this is one of those situations where if you're in a macro-intensive game, set yourself up for success. Get the buildings that you're going to need to respond to whatever your opponent ends up throwing at you, and just kind of concentrate on building enough to survive. If he had pushed out harder earlier in the game, we would have, of course, built more units, but since he didn't, we kept on expanding and we kept on building up our economy. Now, when we see a push out, that's when we started creating more Hydralisks, more Zerglings, and we got the Corruptors to deal with these Colossus. Now, something to note here, Corruptors are so very strong against Colossus. Again, Colossus are being a massive and a hugely tall unit. They can be hit by air units, so these air-to-air Corruptors can hit them. But the thing you want to avoid is running straight under the Stalkers, because then you're just going to get target fired. So it's really about micro. It's really kind of about trying to swing your Corruptors around to the backside of their army when they're engaging the front of your army and trying to pick off the Colossus. That's the main goal. That's typically how you want to play with them. So yeah, again, this is something I'm really trying to drive home in all of our strategy videos, that reactionary playstyle and why it's so effective. Again, we didn't mass up this huge army at the beginning of the game. In fact, all we did was we saw what our opponent was doing. We saw he wasn't pushing out. We kept scouts on his base. And then seeing that he wasn't pushing out at all, we just went for that intensive macro. We expanded. We tried to get our economy incredibly high. And then when we saw the push coming, we then started building units, we then started responding. And that's something you can really do as Zerg because of the way the larva works and because all of your units come out of that same building. They all come out of the hatchery and the lair. Now this is a very bad spot for us to fight because those Colossi can just sit on the top of this ramp and shoot down on stuff. So we really don't want to engage here. As much as we really want to get rid of this rich mineral field, this expansion here, we can't really do that with the ground forces, because all he's going to do is have these Colossus sit up here and just rain hell down on our units. So we are going to end up responding to this by, in fact, getting some Broodlords, and you're going to see that very shortly, not too long, just a few minutes in the game. And he is pushing out here, so this is kind of a better position for us. It's an open field. We are, of course, again, going to be moving up our Corruptors here, and while these Stalkers on the ground are dealing with the Hydralisks, we're using our Corruptors to take out the Colossus, and you really need to make sure you do that as quickly as possible, because these Colossus do so much damage to the Hydralisks. They just completely wipe them out, and you're going to need Corruptors, and you're going to need a lot of them, because again, all it's going to take is some target fire from those Stalkers to take out your Corruptors very quickly. So you want to make sure you have enough to take out them, because that's your main priority in any engagement when you're facing a Protoss player that has Colossus, is taking them out as soon as possible, because they are just going to burn through these units so very quickly. So taking a look here, you do see our Spire is morphing into a greater Spire, and again, the reason we're doing that is because we're moving into the late game here. We're seeing that there isn't much Stargate tech coming out. We haven't seen any Phoenixes at all, so we're not really too worried about his anti-air from a distance. Obviously the Stalkers do pretty well anti-air, but with Broodlords being shooting from so far away, and the majority of the damage coming from the Broodlings, we don't really have to worry about the Stalkers at that point. They're not going to do too much unless they manage to get the Stalkers underneath our Broodlords. But that's just about unit placement, that's about micro, and so as long as you can do those things properly, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. So again, this is how we're responding. We're making just enough to fend off any attacks. We're making sure we keep our economy high. We've kind of expanded to the point of no return at this point. Basically, our only option at this point is maybe to try to break through these rocks or get some overlords to lift up some drones and drop them over here, or to do the same thing over here. It's going to be hard, again, for us to push down here up until the point that we have broodlords, and we obviously pushing into this central location, we're going to get swarmed from both sides from his army. So we're kind of stuck right here, and this is why we're deciding to go for that broodlord tech, because if we don't, then we're not going to be able to do too much else. So taking a look down here, we do have these corruptors scouting about, trying to see if they can pick off any unwearing? No, it's not even a word. See if they can pick off any colossus that are kind of just wandering around, not paying attention. There we go. I'm going to use a full sentence instead of trying to figure out what that word I was trying to use was. But as you can see here, you know, we don't have this massive army. We're not overreacting. We're waiting until we see what he's going for, and then we're responding in turn. And again, because of the way Zerg is structured, because of the larva ability, we are capable of doing that. We can wait until the time is necessary for us to do something, instead of doing something too early before knowing that we need to. Now at this point, we are, again, moving forward with these broodlords. This was our tech switch. This was our decision, because we were kind of put in a bind with not much room for expansion. And with the type of mix of units that he had. And now, as you can see, these broodlords are so very strong. Just the fact that they shoot from far away, they're not directly engaging the units. The unit AI is kind of forced to attack the broodlings. Something you want to avoid is this right here. If you get double, triple size storm on your units, try to make sure you move them. My guess is that the Zerg player here was paying attention on trying to micro his broodlords to make sure that they didn't die. And that obviously, of course, is the smarter of the two decisions, because those are the larger investment. They cost a lot of minerals and Vespians to get out. Now at this point, the Protoss opponent does go ahead and call a good game. It is because he kind of realizes that there's not much he's going to be able to do at this. He doesn't have the proper mix to handle these broodlords. And again, we went for these broodlords because we saw we were in the position where our ground forces going up against his colossi, unless we just vastly outnumbered them, then we weren't going to be able to do too much. And because we were kind of behind in the expansion, and because he had this high yield, us vastly outnumbering his forces wasn't likely to happen. So we had to respond by going for these broodlords, going for a higher tech that's going to be harder for him to deal with. I'm going to go straight to everyone view and just take a look at everything that was going on here. As you can see, he had this expansion up. This one was about out of minerals. And taking a look at his tech here and its units, he does have those few colossi right there. Going back to his base, not too much going on right now. It doesn't look like he has any starports anywhere on the board. So again, without being able to get Phoenix or Void Rays out, he wasn't going to be able to deal with those broodlords, and that is, of course, why he called good game. So we're going to try to just go over things real quick here, go over exactly what happened in this game and why we did what we did. Started off just going for that standard opener with that extractor, followed up by that 14 spawning pool. We used the Vespian for that extractor, and the decision we ended up going for was to get those speed links. Now we scouted our opponent. We did see that this blockade was here. We saw that this fast expansion was likely to be coming, and it was going to be difficult for us to push in without taking significant losses. So our response at that point was, of course, to go ahead and expand ourselves. And then from this point in the game, it's basically just all about setting yourself up for success. It's about expanding when you can, expanding when you feel safe, creating just enough units so that you're going to be safe and you're going to be at least somewhat prepared for an attack, and being ready to make support units as soon as you know something is happening. So it's really all about, with Zerg, it's about scouting, spreading out your creep, trying to get as much vision of the map as you can, having your overlords around your opponent's base, dropping changelings into their base, having Zerglings right outside so you can see when a push is coming. Using all of these to your advantage, and then responding when it's necessary, getting those units when it's necessary. And the other thing to note here is getting those buildings and using them when you need them. Again, we got this spire, and we didn't use it. We didn't build any corruptors or any mutalisks until we saw that our opponent did have colossus. And then again, we got this infestation pit, and we didn't do anything with that. We would have if the situation had been right for it, but we didn't need infestors. It wasn't necessary, so we didn't get them. But it wasn't so much of a waste. I mean, again, we didn't use it, but it was setting ourselves up for success, being prepared if the situation were to come that we did in fact need them. So yeah, guys, this has kind of been a look at a longer game, more of a macro-intensive game. We expand when we feel safe and when we think that it's going to be to our advantage. And again, seeing our Protoss opponent expand, that kind of told us that we'd be pretty safe to expand at that point, and that's what we went with doing. And it's all about just setting yourself up for success, responding properly to what your opponent's doing, and the way you're going to do that is by getting scouting information and realizing what that scouting information means. So again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. But we're pushing forward right now. As you can see, our opponent did go for that fast Hellion build. Pretty strong build, but it's only strong versus Zerglings, unfortunately. And since we do have these roaches here, we're going to be able to push forward pretty much uncontested. He does have this bunker, but Marines don't do too much damage versus